On Bettor Sports Network.
Happy Thursday night, everybody. I know there's a lot going on in the sports world, but there's plenty of you watching right now that are like, I need my fantasy football fix. We're here for that, and we're here for you. It is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Bettor Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. You follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman, of course, the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. I'll get to my co-host, my guest co-host tonight in a second, who's no stranger to the FFPC, by the way. But if you are looking for action right now and you want to draft early, we've had a couple of tournaments going on since January at myffpc.com. The first one is our second annual Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament. Just $125 to join, but you could win $25,000 in that. That's at myffpc.com. And then the Never Too Early, the inaugural Never Too Early Superflex Best Ball Tournament. You win $5,000 in that, and that's just $35 to enter. Both of these are filling up fast at myffpc.com. Just to give you the skinny on it, the slant on this is the drafts stop when the NFL draft starts. So all the action that you're getting in, you're going to get on a level playing field because nobody's drafting in this tournament after April 27th. Best Ball Slim is what we call it at the FFPC. So there's no kickers, there's no defenses. 20-round draft, 14-week regular season. Then you get 3 weeks of playoffs, single elimination playoffs. And we have, I know a lot of people they don't want to dedicate weeks of their schedule to draft slow. And they want to draft fast. We have 30-second clocks and 60-second clocks for you. If you don't want to do that, you don't want to dedicate an hour and a half to drafting, and you do want to spread it out, 2-hour clocks, 6-hour clocks. Those are available at myffpc.com. We're going to get into a lot of dynasty stuff tonight. And if you are looking to play dynasty fantasy football, fantasy football is awesome. Why wouldn't you want to play it 365 days a year? Go to myffpc.com. Click on the Dynasty Leagues from the drop-down, and then there's another link that'll bring up all the orphans that we have available at myffpc.com. A lot of them are reduced prices, so you're going to get good deals on them. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of them that are ready to go for championships this year. A lot of stuff happens in people's lives. Sometimes life gets in the way. New job, new wife, new family, divorce, what have you. A lot of stuff happens, and these teams get orphaned, and a lot of people will pick them up, take advantage of the great deals, which you can get at myffpc.com if you want to play dynasty fantasy football. Want to thank our producer tonight, Bennett Carroll, and of course, our co-host for this evening, no stranger to the FFPC, no stranger to fantasy football, no stranger to dynasty fantasy football. He's from Draft Countdown, at Draft Countdown on Twitter, the Devy Marketplace, at Devy Marketplace on Twitter, and of course, Dynasty League Football, at DLF Football on Twitter. You already follow him if you know what you're doing. And if you don't follow him, become a person who knows what they're doing when it comes to Dynasty Fantasy Football, at Shane P. Hallam. Shane Hallam, welcome into the program tonight, man.
Oh, thanks for having me, Bulky. I'm happy to be here. It's NFL draft season, so I'm just in my wheelhouse right now. I'll tell you that.
It's crazy because we I think we're like 7. I think it's today, right? 7 weeks from today, the NFL draft starts. But the wheels are constantly turning, I should say, and the moves are constantly churning in Dynasty Fantasy Football. And I feel like even though we want to talk, we'll focus on rookies for sure in the second hour, but I think there's moves to be made right now based on the new league year, or free agency, I should say, starting next week. I think March 15th is when it starts. But there's stuff going on right now. And Shane, I feel like, you've seen the topics that we're going to be talking about tonight, especially in this first segment. We'll talk Aaron Rodgers, the moves that the Jets might be making to get him on. Jimmy Garoppolo, where does he fit into this situation? Keenan Allen's restructure, and a ton more. But I think, Shane, that the biggest thing we want to say here right now, you as an experienced Dynasty player, there are so many ways for you to capitalize and make your teams better right now, March 9th, 2023.
There is, because we know that guys are going to get bumps in free agency, whether it be someone leaves that you expected to be re-signed, or, even if a player signs elsewhere, like we expect someone like David Montgomery to go elsewhere. So Khalil Herbert's going to get a bump, even if we already think that. So, I in the Devy Marketplace podcast, we play the value game. Trade for a guy, even if you don't want him, if his value is going to go up, right? When we hit the new year, free agency happens, then you trade him again. Now, that's the beauty of Dynasty. You just gain value. You just gain picks. So that's really how I play, and it's worked out for me.
I know you may have played against him too, a long time FFPC high stakes veteran, Rob Vieira. I've interviewed him several times. And one of the things that's always stuck with me, and he said when he plays Dynasty, he's a very successful Dynasty player. He always says, like, one of the biggest things that you need to be doing is always trade for assets that are ascending, not assets that are plateauing or that are going to be descending, right? And I think there's a thought out there, and I don't think it's necessarily wrong in every sense, but there's a thought out there of going for it, right? Where you trade, certain draft picks for a player because you're going for a championship. And I think that's fine in certain situations. But I also think that there are a lot of players out there who have the endowment effect and think that they are loaded for bear. Their team is awesome. And then they end up sacrificing their future, and their team wasn't very good to begin with. And then all of a sudden now you're into a rebuild when you didn't really have to be, which I think is interesting. We'll get into that in hour number 2. What I want to kick off the show with today is Aaron Rodgers. Now, Diana Rossini this morning from ESPN.com had a story published about several things regarding the Jets' visit to Aaron Rodgers in California. There's optimism, this is her quote here. There's optimism in the Jets organization that they are on the brink of getting the 4-time MVP in the green and white uniform. Woody Johnson, Robert Saleh, Nathaniel Hackett all reported to head out to California to meet with Aaron Rodgers. I think they're out there for about 11, 12 hours. They flew back real late, not last night, but the night before. And what's interesting here is, well, I don't want to get into it like a sports talk radio thing. I want to focus this on fantasy football here. So Shane, knowing what we know about this now, that Aaron Rodgers could be coming to New York, what are you doing with guys like Garrett Wilson? What are you doing with guys like CJ Uzomah, who just got his contract restructured? Looks like he's going to be there for this coming year. I know Breece Hall has been mentioned quite a bit by a lot of high-stakes owners I'm talking about. And then conversely, Jordan Love in Dynasty, Christian Watson in Dynasty, Aaron Jones in Dynasty Fantasy Football. Who are you hopping aboard right now? Who are you trying to deal for, and who are you trying to deal away, knowing that this Rodgers thing could happen soon?
I like most of those assets because I think it improves the Jets' offense. And if the Jets' offense improves, I think that helps everyone. Even for Garrett Wilson, you say like his cost is extraordinary already with no quarterback there because we figure he'll get someone. But even if not, it's still very high. But if the Jets are scoring more points, Garrett Wilson's going to score more touchdowns, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I think Aaron Rodgers brings to the table. Whatever you think about him and his play, it's much better than Zach Wilson, Mike White, and Joe Flacco. Mm-hmm. So I'm buying those younger players on the Jets. I think Breece Hall right now is a buy. I think if he doesn't get hurt, we're talking about him as the RB1 in Dynasty right now. So go out and buy him now as the RB4 or 5. I think it's a pretty good deal. The Packers are interesting because I really like Jordan Love. I thought what we saw of him was a good arm, someone that's learned and gotten better since he was in college. I think he's a tremendous buy, especially in super flex leagues where you can get him. He's on par with like Derek Carr right now. I'd trade Derek Carr for Jordan Love and take the shot. I would probably wait till Rodgers is gone, and then I'm going to target those Packers assets. You mentioned Aaron Jones, but I think Christian Watson might be the guy that I would go after.
This. I mean, I'm in Northeast Wisconsin, so I'm in the midst of all this where it's all Rodgers all the time. And I'll say this: anybody who thinks they know that Jordan Love is going to be a good pro or a bad pro is just speculating. They're just guessing, right? Because we've seen so little. We saw one game against the Chiefs where there was 30-mile-an-hour crosswinds, and he lost that game. Didn't look all that great, but quite frankly, Patrick Mahomes was opposite him. You look back at that game, Mahomes' stats were pretty bad that game too. Then you look at the Detroit game that he came in at the end of the season when pretty much all the backups were in for Green Bay. They benched everybody, and he's throwing to guys like Juwan Winfrey instead of Devontae Adams. Can't really gauge him on that. The closest we can come is that Eagles game where Rodgers got hurt, left the game. Jordan Love came in for a few series and looked great. Darius Slay on his podcast, the all-world corner for Philly, said, we're ready to pin our ears back. We're licking our chops. We're ready to go after this guy. And he came in and he cut us up, and we were trying hard. This wasn't Eagles' second string guys. I mean, they were going hard after him. Again, very small sample size, but he looked very good there. Here's what I take away from it. The Packers themselves have changed their tune. And this is pretty much inarguable. The Packers have changed their tune on what they have said about Jordan Love in his first couple of years to now what they're saying about him this offseason. Is that because they are ready to move on from Aaron Rodgers and they believe in Jordan Love? Is it because they're just thinking that that's what's going to happen and they want to build up his confidence? That's all possibilities, right? And I don't know. But I do know they've changed their tune for the first time since Jordan Love has been drafted. They have immense confidence in this young man. I drafted him in a redraft league a couple of weeks ago. The thing is, I play in a lot of shallow dynasty leagues, Shane, where it's like 22, 23 man rosters. And for me, I always in single quarterback league. So it's difficult for me to roster 2 quarterbacks because I'm always, trying to load up on one injury away type running backs. But with this Jordan Love thing, man, I think he's undervalued right now. I think for me, now is the time to try to acquire him for cheap, and because his value is going to go way up. And to your point, like the Jets or the Packers skill position guys are going to be cheaper once Rodgers is traded for a little period. I don't think it's a long period, but I think that it's going to happen where you can buy low on guys like Watson, Jones, Dobbs, and really cash in, right?
Yeah, I think it's the case. I think it's going to be the case in a lot of the redraft leagues too. You're going to see people just unsure for just a short period of time, a week or two in these too early best ball leagues. Like that's what I'm jumping on and trying to pick up those Packers assets because I don't think that offense is going down the toilet. Like I don't think the Packers offense is going to be bottom 10 in the league, even if Jordan Love, like you said, is not as great, tremendous quarterback. They have the run game. They have a decent offensive line in some spots. So, yeah, I'm right there with you.
Braxton Berrios was reported by Adam Schefter that he's going to be released coming up next week. I think this came out this morning, right? Yeah, this morning. 46 catches for 431 yards 2 years ago. But you look at what this could entail with Rodgers going to the Jets, probably means Randall Cobb would stand a pretty good chance of ending up with New York as well to take Berrios' place. Is there any value in Berrios if you're playing in a deeper dynasty league? Is there any value with Cobb potentially going to Green Bay that you want to acquire these guys, or are you more focused on high upside guys and let those guys, be taken by other people in your league?
Yeah, I think I'm out. I mean, Braxton Berrios 2 years ago was like, oh, this is someone intriguing, and then last year he was awful. He cost them games. Like it was, I don't know what happened. But between those 2 years, but I don't even know. Maybe the Patriots signed him. I know he was on their roster practice squad at some point, and they didn't want to let him go. So maybe he goes back there. But like, other than like a last round dart throw for him, and even Cobb, I mean, it's nice. But I do think the Jets could draft someone and add to that receiving group, depending on how they feel about Elijah Moore. So I think it's kind of a wait and see approach with both.
Speaking of quarterbacks here, Jimmy Garoppolo is in the news. Now, Jonathan Jones from CBS reported that there's a, quote, push within the building for the Houston Texans to go after and get Jimmy G on their team. Garoppolo would make sense if the Texans, who I believe are number 2 in the draft, if they're going to go after a quarterback, be that Bryce Young, Stroud, Anthony Richardson now is probably in play. I think it would make sense for Garoppolo to be the guy in 2023, perhaps 2024, and then they'll let the rookie take over after that. DeMeco Ryans was on the coaching staff of San Francisco the last several years while Jimmy Garoppolo was there as well. It's going to kind of come down to like, do I really want to go to Houston where there's not, a whole lot of assets, but it could be one of those things where it was like the Baker Mayfield syndrome last year where, he wanted to start somewhere and then all of a sudden all the jobs got taken. Like this could be Garoppolo's opportunity to come to Houston. I don't necessarily want to talk about this from a Garoppolo angle. Well, maybe we could, because he could still go to Las Vegas. Potentially, if Aaron Rodgers decides he wants to stay in Green Bay, then maybe Garoppolo to the Jets happens as well. But, for Houston, if Garoppolo goes there, what do you think about a guy like Brandon Cooks if he stays there? Nico Collins, and then John Mechie, who was a dynasty darling. Until we found out about his illness, and it seems like he's recovered from that. But you talk about the Houston receivers there, man, they might be a quarterback away from making a real difference in fantasy leagues.
And we saw Dameon Pierce have success. So it's not like the Texans are a bad offense. It's a team that has good offensive line pieces too, which I think is key. So if a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo comes in, has experience, he's made fantasy receivers relevant. So I would love it for a Brandon Cooks if he stays. I like it for Nico Collins. I think John Mechie is the late round redraft dart throw to take in that offense right now, because even if they draft a receiver high, which it seems like they're very interested in doing, TCU running back Kendre Miller commented that the Texans interviewed him and were more interested in Quentin Johnston, the receiver from TCU, instead of him. So I think they're going to add somebody. But even the guys that are there, I think it can be an offense in honestly a weak division. Like the secondaries in that division aren't great. So I think Texans can score some points. So I like taking some throws at those offensive assets.
Just to talk about Kendre Miller for a second. And by the way, we just got a chime in on the chat. Something I was going to ask you anyway, but this is good stuff. Let's get to that right now. What would be an even trade piece, John Mechie, in dynasty leagues? Let's frame it for an FFPC dynasty league. Shane, this is what I had in my mind. Would you give up an early to mid second round rookie pick for John Mechie right now?
I probably would want a late second, early third. Because I think teams with
if you're trying to acquire him, right?
If I'm trying to get him, right? So I'd rather send that late second. I think there's kind of a tier break in this draft, kind of early 204, 205, one quarterback league. So and if a team had Mechie, like, they're probably not super excited, right? So I think you might be able to get that, especially maybe not now, maybe during the actual rookie draft.
We're going to talk about Giants in a second, but Mr. Bakes-a-lot wants to know, would you give up Wan'Dale Robinson for John Mechie right now, Shane Hallam?
I like Wan'Dale Robinson this year. So I think I would keep Wan'Dale. It's close. I think it's close. But until we see John Mechie on the field, as much as I like him, when Wan'Dale was in there, he was effective. And the Giants, even if they draft a receiver, I think Wan'Dale has that slot position locked up.
I like him quite a bit too, and I'm just looking at the Never Too Early ADP right now. Wan'Dale Robinson, this is again redraft, but the Never Too Early tournament that I talked about at the start of the show, wide receiver 60 at the 1303. Man, that is going after Tyler Boyd. It's after Rondale Moore. It's after Kayshon Boutte, and it's right before Josh Downs, KJ Osborne, and then Sky Moore. I like that ADP. If you can get Wan'Dale Robinson in the 13th round, I think you're doing things right.
I've taken him in one already, so I'm there.
Preaching to the choir, preaching to the converted. Yeah. All right, so let's get into to talk about the Giants, as I just said. Daniel Jones, 4 years, $160 million with $35 million in incentives. I was talking with one of my co-hosts for one of my other shows, and he was telling me, he's like, why wouldn't they sign Barkley and then tag Jones on a 1-year prove-it deal? Franchise tag. And I was like, I think he proved it last year. This is new coach, new offense, and he was awesome. Best season of his career. And now you're locking in this guy for 4 years at $40 million a year, which I think, we talk about, that's insane. But I think as these, and if Lamar Jackson ever signs with somebody, he'll kind of set, like the Joe Burrow, the Justin Herbert, those extensions and everything. I think this is going to look like a bargain. The Giants declined his 5th-year option, but he was awesome. Ran for 7 touchdowns last year as well. For fantasy purposes, Shane, I think we think of Daniel Jones as a guy that's underwhelming, as a guy that maybe hasn't lived up to his 6th overall pick pedigree. But if you push that aside and just look at the stats from last year, there's a lot to like about Daniel Jones. And I think because he has such a negative connotation in dynasty circles, I think you can actually trade for him for less than he's probably worth right now.
He's another guy in Superflex leagues. I mean, I am going out there to try to trade for him because of that perception. I thought I'd have to fight you. I thought I'd be in the minority. Everyone seems to hate this deal, and I'm like, I think this is kind of a steal. And for fantasy, he runs. That's really the key, right? I mean, he was what, the quarterback 9, I think, in FFPC Dynasty scoring. I mean, how you're not going to get much better than that, but if I get that every year, like I'd be happy. And you can trade a lot of the guys that performed worse than him. I would trade Tua for Daniel Jones plus. Get a pick too.
Yep.
I think you're going to get the similar production, if not more production, because of that rushing ability.
Now, on the flip side, let's talk about Saquon Barkley here for a second, because this was a guy that is going to be franchise non-exclusive franchise tag on Barkley. So Barkley is getting a minimum of just over $10 million. The Giants want to sign him. At least publicly, they said they want to sign him. He's been asking for between 14 and 16 million. Again, this is what's reported that he's been asking for. He turned down $12 million a year in the middle of last season. He's 26 years old, 1,300 plus rushing yards last year, 10 touchdowns in his first year with Brian Dable. I can't imagine another team giving up 2 first-round picks for the right to pay Saquon Barkley all this money. But this is, I think, for fantasy-wise, if you want to be invested in Saquon Barkley, this is a good thing because he's in a contract year, right, that he can cash in at the end of the season. I think this is a good thing for his value right now. And if you do have him on any of your dynasty teams and you're a little bit skittish about, the career year he had last year, maybe now's the time to cash out. I don't know your thoughts on Saquon Barkley. Please share.
I think he's going to have a good year. I do think I would probably cash out because I think his ADP is still in the top 6 running backs in dynasty startups right now, which to me is a little bit crazy, especially when you consider, the rookies coming in, some of the younger backs like Breece Hall, like we talked about before. I probably would offer Saquon plus a second for Breece Hall. I think it's a good time to move him, even if you're a contending team, like we talked about at the top of the show. Even if you're contending, don't get stuck holding the bag with Saquon in 2 or 3 years when he signs that big contract, gets hurt again, and it's over.
So here's my irritation with early drafting right now. First of all, I love it when you can do it because it's so much fun to draft in January. But 2 years in a row now, Shane, I wouldn't say heavy on Joshua Palmer, but I drafted him in several leagues because last year I was like, Keenan Allen's getting cut. It's Palmer time. It's going to be Palmer and Williams. And then Allen stayed there. And Palmer was good in certain games when Allen was out. But now this year I did the same thing. Allen's going to be cut. When you heard the reports out of Los Angeles from the beat reports say, like, yeah, this guy's probably going to be cut. He's probably not going to be on the team this year. And then Tom Pelissero early this morning, reports that the Chargers not only restructured the contract of Mike Williams, but also of Keenan Allen. And they cleared $9 million in salary cap space, $5.5 million with Williams. 9 for Allen, 5.5 with Williams. Allen is going on, I believe this will be his age 32 season. He caught 66 passes, 750 yards in just 10 games last year because of injuries. And now he's back this year, and I'm left holding my Joshua Palmer shares, not hoping for an injury, but understanding that I need one of these guys to go down in order for Palmer to have some spike week potential. Keenan Allen right now, I want to be out of the Keenan Allen business for Dynasty. What is a good return to give up for him right now? Can I still get a mid-second rounder? Can I still get an early second rounder, or is that ship sailed?
I think you can get a mid-second rounder if a team is pretty good, 206, 207, worst case. I think someone would be willing to pay that because you still get a year with Justin Herbert here, and Keenan Allen has been productive when he's on the field. I think this is his age 31 season, but still pretty old, especially with the injuries that he's had. To me, it looks like Tom Telesco, the GM's just like, we got to get close to a Super Bowl on this rookie contract for Justin Herbert for the last year, or I'm fired. But yeah, I think the problem, I think Keenan Allen, like, I don't know, we said it last year, so maybe I'm wrong, but it feels like it's got to be the last year, right? Like this has got to be.
That's what I said.
I said that too.
I said the same thing. So maybe like now that we see, so this is why it's always important in dynasty fantasy football to strike while the iron's hot. Now that we know that the Chargers restructured, we know Allen is going to be on the team for another year. Isn't there a certain buying window for Joshua Palmer right now?
Yeah, I think there is, because I think he's better and more talented than a lot of the receivers you can get for a late second round rookie pick. That's probably what I would give up for Palmer. And I think maybe you could even get him for like the 301, 302 if you have that pick. People are gonna, I think, feel pretty bad, like you holding the bag with Josh Palmer, who's not going to do anything unless there's an injury.
Let's get back to the Jimmy Garoppolo discussion first. Matt Deutsch hanging out with us tonight, watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Shout out to him. Jimmy Garoppolo. We talked about him going to the Texans, potentially the Jets if they don't get Rodgers. Obviously the Raiders. What about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who always seem like they want to contend every single year? They're going to have Evans, Godwin, obviously Cade Otton took a step forward this past year. There's still pieces on that defense that can make them a contender. And look at the division they play in, right? I mean, like they won with a losing record last year. What if Garoppolo goes to Tampa? Now all of a sudden the values for Evans and Godwin look a lot better than they do right now, as I think Kyle Trask is atop their draft chart or depth chart. I mean,
yeah, they've that's all they got. Yeah, I think he's the only one on the roster, so
right.
That's it. Yeah, I think it's possible. I know their cap space is not pretty right now, but look, we've seen every team be able to make that work. I think they would be in. I think they would try, especially to keep pushing it. I like the thought. I don't know if they're going to be able to get the money done. That's the only barrier there.
Right, and there are. I mean, like I think Levante David might be gone. Was it Devin White that was making weird posts on Instagram or something about him potentially being released too? So I mean, these were the guys that were leading this defense. Just 3 years ago when they won the Super Bowl, and now all of a sudden they might not be a part of the team next year. So I guess this is interesting too. And I want to get to your thoughts on Rachaad White here shortly. But Evans and Godwin, knowing that Trask is the only guy there right now. Is this a buying window? Is this something that you'd be looking to acquire Evans and Godwin? Or, Evans is a little bit long in the tooth now, comparatively speaking to a lot of other receivers in the league. But Evans and Godwin, what have you been doing in your dynasty leagues with either trying to ship those guys out or bring them in?
I've been making offers for both of them. I offered, I think, like a mid-second for Evans, which it didn't get done, but I think it was close. Similar to Keenan Allen, right? And you're getting maybe a guy a year younger who's put up 1,000-yard season every year. Maybe I think he could still do it. Godwin's interesting. I have kind of offered up late first, even the 111, 112. I think it's very enticing for a Chris Godwin owner. And because I think Chris Godwin's talented, and there's always a shot in a year or two that they might have to tear the whole thing down. Godwin's out. He's 28 and still a pretty good fantasy player.
Rachaad White, Leonard Fournette is going to be released or has been released, Shane. So Rachaad White atop the depth chart there. This is one of those things that we do in Dynasty every year where if you have a guy like Rachaad White, fingers crossed that they don't bring anybody in on day one or day two, and all of a sudden Rachaad White's value comes out of the NFL draft looking really good. Do you like to play running back roulette like this where, if you have a guy, because I got White in a couple of teams and I go back and forth. Should I cash in now and get what I can, or should I keep him and hope that the Buccaneers don't add anybody in free agency, which is a great free agency class, or drafting somebody this year? It's a weird thing with White. How do you handle him?
I think you got to look at the player and look at what they asked him to do last year. So for me, I think White's a sell right now. I think I would probably play it a little bit safe. I think they have to add someone. They only have 2 running backs on the roster, so someone's getting added. Maybe it's no one good, but someone's getting added. That kind of lends itself to maybe a draft pick, first round, maybe not second round. But we've learned 3rd or 4th round draft picks. They can split time and that's it. So I've offered Rachaad White up for a late first round pick. I drafted him in a lot of early seconds. If I get kind of the bump this year, I got a little bit of production out of him. Get a year younger. He was an older back coming into the league. That's a plus for me.
Last thing I want to get to this segment here, or maybe we'll get to more. I'm not really sure. Matt chiming in on the chat. You have John Mechie. Somebody offers you Elijah Moore straight up for him in Dynasty. What would you do? Which side would you rather have?
Ooh, I think that's a kind of a spicy one because of Moore's just issues there. I probably would still take Elijah Moore. Look, I praised John Mechie. Every trade a possibility, I'm trading him away, I guess. But I still like him. But I think I do like. We've seen Elijah Moore produce at least.
I like it, and I think what's interesting about this is it's kind of like how you personally are in Dynasty, right? Because we've seen Elijah Moore have the opportunity. We saw him take advantage of the opportunity his rookie year. And then we saw this past year where he was a little bit disgruntled or gruntled. I don't know what the proper nomenclature is there with his role in the Jets offense. But it's probably not going to be Zach Wilson this year. Could be Aaron Rodgers. Could be somebody else. It should be somebody better than Zach Wilson. And you think, okay, well, maybe there's something about Elijah Moore that makes me want to acquire him, especially if Corey Davis is released. Has Corey Davis been released? I know there is a lot of talk on it. And if he hasn't, maybe he's going to, but it doesn't sound like he's, figuring into the 2023 plans for the New York Jets.
Yeah, I don't think he's been cut yet, but that's the expectation. I think once we hit March 15th, this will start coming.
We are coming hard on the show tonight, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Bettor Sports Network. Ladies and gentlemen, we have just scraped the surface. We have not talked Lamar Jackson. We have not talked DeAndre Hopkins. We haven't talked about the number one pick in the NFL draft. What are the Bears going to do with it, and how does it affect your dynasty fantasy football teams? I don't know if you got a chance to read the Calvin Ridley piece in the Player Tribune. That was eye-opening, and I know that certain offers have been proffered in a lot of my dynasty leagues after my fellow competitors read that today. And then we'll get into Chosen Anderson. Who's Chosen Anderson? You're going to have to wait to find out. We'll be right back. It's Eric Balkman from the FFPC. He's Shane Hallam from the Debbie Marketplace, Dynasty League Football, and of course, Draft Countdown. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Bettor Sports Network.
The Playbook with Fensty and Ronis, presented by FantasyAlarm.com. Weekdays at 5 Eastern.
People are always very critical when it comes to fantasy baseball. I would say this, and I'm a big fantasy basketball guy. I love fantasy football. There's no fantasy sport that's even close to being as hard as baseball. The season, having to figure out, especially if you're playing weekly, which I don't like to play. Weekly with the 2 starts, having to look at the schedule and everything. I mean, you play in basketball as well. There's no fantasy sport that's harder or more involved than baseball. It takes forever. You take a whole night to do your fab on Sundays.
Yeah, baseball is the most challenging, and I think that's why the popularity has gone down. People don't want to work. They don't want to put in the time. There's a lot of strategy that goes into it. You have to know the player pool. That's why I love doing these 15-team, 50-round drafts. I mean, 750, 800 players. You lower all the minor leaguers. I took Spencer Strider last year in my first draft Champions League in round 40, and that turned out to be a phenomenal pick. So it puts you on to knowing everything about every team. And yeah, it's a lot of work. So I definitely think that it's a challenge, and I just feel people don't want to put in time and work anymore. And I'm not saying fantasy football is easy. It's not. But you cannot tell me that fantasy football is more difficult than fantasy baseball. I play both sports. I don't have an allegiance to either one. I love both. I play both. But, fantasy baseball is a grind, man. You got to put in months of preparation. Spring training is important. They helped me get Carlos Rodon a couple years ago. I was not on him until the spring, seeing the velocity and the changes. So there's a lot of things you can discover in the spring. And this is the first real full spring training that we've had in years. Now, there is the WBC that is going to cut into it a little bit, and some guys will not be at camp. But the spring can help you discover. And again, you're talking about, even if you're in a 12-team league, I mean, you're probably going to have 23 to 30 roster spots. And then the 15-team leagues and the minor leagues, I mean, you got to know a lot. I mean, it takes a lot of skill to win a fantasy baseball title. We've seen it, right? You can have an average player win a fantasy football league. We've all been in leagues where yeah, this guy's not that good. He's probably going to win a championship at some point. Things break right. He has a great draft, picks up a player off the waiver wire. That's not happening in fantasy baseball, man. You do not see bad players win fantasy baseball championships. You just don't. It's a 6-month season. You can't afford to take a week or two off from fab. You can't do it. Last year, say you took off the week where Taylor Ward was the big pickup. You lost a player that was a contributor most of the season. I know we had a couple of down periods, and Taylor Ward was a player I added in multiple leagues, but you can't take that time off. You can't afford to miss out. And, every little detail is important. So I know fantasy baseball is not as popular as it used to be, but I personally feel it's because people don't want to work hard. They just don't. Everyone wants the easy way out now. They want easy access. That's why people don't read anymore. They want a quick video. Fantasy baseball is a lot of work, trust me. But you know what? When you win a championship, it's really gratifying.
Make bets and follow your fantasy team while you buy, sell, and trade collectibles in real time. Only on Bettor Sports Network. High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Bettor Sports Network.
This is what we're talking about here. Fascinating stuff. Non-exclusive tag for the former MVP in Baltimore. And we've heard that not a lot of interest out there. So how do you do that? How do you get interest going on in your dynasty leagues? Shane Hallam from the Draft Countdown, the Debbie Marketplace, and of course, Dynasty League Football is going to weigh in on that and more. I do want to mention this too, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, thank you for watching. Number two, here's your reward. We're getting you ready for the upcoming baseball season with the Bettor baseball preview. From fantasy baseball, to MLB betting, and the newest baseball cards for 2023, you can access our exclusive content for free right now. Bettorsports.com, featuring some of the best baseball minds in the industry: Adam Ronis, Ray Flowers, Kyle Elfrink, Cody Decker, and more. Get player profiles, prop bets, and futures, sleepers, busts, fantasy draft strategy, collectibles, and more at no cost. Register with your name and email at bettorsports.com. Bettorsports.com. Right now, get instant access plus notifications when new features are released. Go to bettorsports.com and sign up for the Bettor baseball preview. Bettorsports.com. So let's talk about this Lamar Jackson situation, Shane Hallam. We know that he's on the non-exclusive tag. We know that the negotiations have been going on for quite a while between him and Baltimore. He's acting as his own agent. I think his mother or his stepmother, I always get confused on that, is like acting as his manager / agent. So what's interesting about this is the Ravens have called his bluff. You don't like what we're offering. There's no way we're going to pay you $250 million guaranteed. Go find yourself a good deal. And if you get one, we'll match it. Well, so far, the Panthers have said no. The Falcons have said no. The Dolphins have said no. We found from 2 Washington Commanders beat reporters that the Commanders have said no. I don't know where he's going to get this deal from. I have been in a holding pattern with Lamar Jackson. Have not really sent out any offers. Looking at offers, I haven't really gotten any. That's no surprise there. But Lamar Jackson, is there a way you can capitalize on this contract situation? Or are you just better off just seeing how it plays out and then, making your move then? How do you handle Lamar Jackson in your dynasty leagues?
He's still an elite fantasy player, so I think I'm going to go out there and toss some offers out there. I'm not going to, overpay, and, in a super flex league, you kind of have to overpay. That's kind of the problem, is if you have him, you're not going to sell him for less than he was worth before all this. And if you want him, you're not going to pay what he was worth before for all this. So I'll sprinkle it out there if someone gets scared. Like, I'll toss Trevor Lawrence out for Lamar, someone pretty close in value, and see if they'll bite. Because wherever he goes, I think it's still going to be Baltimore. He's going to run the ball, and that's all I need for fantasy points.
We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think. No Greg Roman, and now you have Todd Monken as the offensive coordinator, knowing how much he likes to pass and knowing how good Lamar Jackson is at running the football. I mean, there's a non-zero chance we see Lamar Jackson have one of the best years of his career this year, right?
I think it could happen, especially if he's playing on this tag and it's like, okay, I got another year. I got to prove my worth. Like, he's going to go out and prove it, especially after the injury last year. I think this could be a perfect offense, because I think Greg Roman was kind of losing the grip on how to do the offense for Lamar Jackson. I think this could be perfect. So I get it. Like, and I understand teams being out. They don't want to negotiate for the Ravens. I think it's exactly what the Ravens are doing. I've seen tweets of people like put a poison pill in the contract. That got banned. Well, how was it? Steve Hutchinson. Remember that?
Yep.
With the Vikings.
And Nate Burleson. It was Hutchinson and Nate Burleson back in the day. Yep.
So that got banned. So, just making things up. The Ravens are just, if you can get a deal somewhere, someone else will pay it, we'll pay it. But they know that he wasn't getting this.
Well, and the other thing too, and I think more than a few people have pointed out, is this collusion around the NFL that they refused to pay Lamar Jackson this money when Deshaun Watson got paid by Jimmy Haslam and the Browns last year. And let me know if you disagree with me, but I feel like it's not collusion. It's just good business sense. These teams don't want to offer $250+ million guaranteed for anyone. God himself could not probably get a guaranteed contract in the NFL right now. And I don't think it's collusion at all. I think it's just people, GMs being responsible with the owner's cash and making sure that they're able to be flexible with other players going forward. I think you're right. I think he's back with Baltimore. I don't think he gets paid. I don't think there's any collusion going on here. I think it's just smart GMs.
Yeah, and owners that don't have the money, you have to put that money in escrow if it's a guaranteed contract. A lot of owners don't have that much money, like, in cash on hand. So, they might have the assets, they might have the net worth, but not the cash. So you're already taken out. So, why would Daniel Snyder put money away in escrow when he might be selling the team anyway?
Exactly.
He's not going to do it.
Let's talk about DeAndre Hopkins. We talk about the the process of getting paid here, DeAndre Hopkins got paid. In fact, I think when the Packers were trying to re-up with Devontae Adams before last season, Hopkins' contract came into question because Hopkins was the highest paid receiver in the NFL, but there were some differences in the guaranteed money in his contract as opposed to what the Packers are offering Devontae Adams. So yes, he was the highest paid receiver, but he kind of wasn't at the same time. And now it seems like the Cardinals might be in a little bit of a rebuilding mode. New GM, new head coach, Kyler Murray coming off the ACL, right? And Hopkins not getting any younger. And I feel like he's still playing pretty elite right now. But Shane, to me, and I'll ask you where you think he's going to end up. I think the odds are less than 50% he ends up in Arizona for 2023. But I really don't know where he's going to go. I think somebody's going to pony up and give Arizona what they're looking for. Second round pick, I think, is what the report said. But at the same time, like, I think for Hopkins, for me right now, if I'm in a situation where I'm a receiver away, yeah, I'm probably going to I'm talking dynasty fantasy football now. I think I'm going to pony up the draft picks to acquire him because I think wherever he goes, he's going to have a big season and maybe 2 big seasons.
Especially because he mentioned he's flexible in those last 2 years of his deal.
Right.
So
Yeah.
if you have a big year, now you can kind of demand the money back again. It makes a lot of sense. And I think if he does get traded, it's going to be to a team probably with a decent quarterback. New York Giants, Daniel Jones, Chicago Bears with Justin Fields. So, yeah, I think you can get him for a second-round rookie pick. People are scared of the age. They're scared of the suspension and then injury, where it seemed like, honestly, I think toward the end he just kind of quit. Like Arizona kind of quit. It was over.
For me, like it is a slam dunk. It's not even a question. If I reach out to somebody and I offer up like the 203, the 204, something like that, and they're offering me Hopkins, like I'm that's a smash accept for me. Especially if I need a receiver. Like I think he's going to put up, top 20. Top 25 numbers as a floor this year. And if that's the case, then he's totally worth that. Like the second round, and we'll get into this in the second hour, but to me, like second round picks are just they're so hit or miss. And I think the valuation of what a second round rookie pick is worth is actually higher in our minds than it actually is, because the hit rate on second rounds, again, we'll get into this in the second hour, the hit rates of second round and even third round rookie picks are not good right now. Speaking of draft picks, the Chicago Bears are in an interesting situation. They have the number 1 overall pick, but they also have Justin Fields, a guy who was awesome last year for fantasy purposes, maybe not for passing purposes, but for fantasy purposes, he was great. They could trade back. I know the Colts would be interested in making a deal with them to move up from 4 to 1 to perhaps get Bryce Young, who Jim Irsay says looks pretty good. Maybe they trade back more than once. Maybe they trade back more than twice in the draft. Shane, as you look at what the Bears could do and what they probably will do with this pick here, how do you handle a guy like Justin Fields? How do you handle some of these rookie picks that could be proved to be very interesting if the Bears are trading back twice in the top 10?
I think I'm in on Justin Fields. Like we talked about Lamar, you have the rushing floor. I think people see a rushing quarterback, they think ceiling. I think floor. Like there's a fantasy floor that Justin Fields is going to meet. We saw it last year. He can just run around and do something. And so if they get more assets and to help him, I think that's only positive for him. And it definitely shakes up the NFL draft landscape, especially in super flex leagues. Someone's moving up for a quarterback. We have 4 potential quarterbacks that could go in the top 10 of the NFL draft. That's going to be the big piece. The rumors right now are either the Bears will trade down twice, like you said, maybe trade down to 4 with the Colts, trade down again into the 10 to 12 range, something like that. And maybe take Jackson Smith and Jigba, Justin Fields, from Ohio State. I don't think they played together his freshman year. They did, but that was about it. That they really like him. So it could definitely provide an asset both for Fields and JSN being probably the top receiver in rookie drafts if he goes to Chicago.
What about, and I can't remember who I was talking to, excuse me, about this, but that the top 3 picks in the NFL draft could all be quarterbacks, right? You have Chicago who could trade out of it. Houston, who obviously wants a quarterback, right? And then Arizona, who has one, but they could trade down. Indianapolis obviously would be a candidate to move up. I think the Las Vegas Raiders, if they put together the right package, they're a team that could definitely move up as well. I don't think Desmond Ridder has ever been the answer in Atlanta. I'm not sure why they drafted him. I don't think he ever profiled to be a franchise quarterback. Carolina obviously needs a quarterback. No, not New Orleans. Philadelphia is picking 10th. I beg your pardon. Via trade. They don't need a quarterback. But I look at those other teams like Las Vegas, Atlanta, like all these teams could be moving up to draft a quarterback, and we could see, Young, Stroud, Richardson going as the top 3 picks. As long as we're talking about Richardson, film is not great. Measurables out of this world. Dynasty fantasy football. What are your feelings about Anthony Richardson, a fantasy football player? Maybe not necessarily in his rookie year, but what you're giving up to acquire him to be a member of your dynasty teams.
The most athletic quarterback in NFL history. That's what gets me. I knew he was going to work out well, but he is so that much better than Cam Newton. And a lot of his drills, the vert, the broad, were not just the best in combine history, the best in NFL history, every quarterback ever. So, to me as a draft guy, like Anthony Richardson is my QB3 in the draft because I do think there's a lot of passing problems. As a fantasy player, he's my QB1 in this draft for fantasy leagues. Once again, you're getting a rushing floor when you have a guy that is, can run in the 4.4s and is 244 pounds. Like, it's going to be tough to bring down. He's going to be able to provide that value. So in a super flex league, I'm taking him at the 102 in rookie drafts. And I think it's what you got to start looking at. If you have people that are gun shy about him, he falls to the 103, 104, then I'm moving up because even if he doesn't start for a year, his value is going to stay kind of consistent. I think Anthony Richardson isn't going to be a great pro, maybe has a good year or two, but for fantasy, we don't need it. If he runs for 600, 700 yards and 12 touchdowns, I mean, if the QB sneaking, you can just QB sneak every goal line with Anthony Richardson. You score automatic touchdown every time.
So this just came across, I want to say, just a few minutes ago, or maybe a little bit more than an hour ago. Tom Pelissero from the NFL Network says that Odell Beckham is going to hold a workout tomorrow for NFL teams in Arizona. He can sign at any time. He's 13 months recovered from his ACL. I feel like he has been ever since that his rookie year was awesome, and then the second year I think was really good too. But ever since then, he's just been a tease for us, right? He's gotten hurt, or he's let us down, or he didn't have a good quarterback, all these other things. And now he's, coming up on, in November, he turns 31. Just in a blink of an eye, all of a sudden he's on the wrong side of 30. Odell Beckham, he might even be a free agent in some dynasty leagues. How do you handle a guy like him? What would you give up to grab Odell Beckham right now, Shane, in a dyno format?
I'll give up a third if someone has him rostered. And I would probably do it before he signs. I'd probably try now.
Totally. Absolutely.
Because once if he signs with the Cowboys or he signs with the Giants or whatever, now it's like, oh, wait, Odell Beckham. But I'll take a shot. Do I think I'm getting much? No. But, third round rookie pick, what am I getting there? Is probably not much. So I think it's worth a chance if he goes, if the Giants sign him and they end up not being able to draft a receiver very high, now he's a starter.
Yeah. This is what I always like, dynasty leagues that allow you to balloon, your roster can balloon up to whatever in the off season. Because a lot of times it's I have a problem where I have too many draft picks. And I can't move the draft picks for a player that I might be able to keep. And then like with the players, like to me, your roster at the end of the season will look radically different when you have to have cut down. And all those players that you're like, how am I ever going to cut this guy? All of a sudden, start of the season rolls around, like, oh yeah, it's going to be pretty easy to cut this guy. And I just hate having all these draft picks of using my players that have no shot of being on my roster. So I like the idea of trading a third for Odell Beckham right now, and I should know, right, when it comes down to cut down. And if I give up a third round and I cut Beckham, I'm okay with that, and you should be too, viewers here. Tonight, Calvin Ridley had a player tribune article published, I think this morning, about the lows he was having, the mental health issues, the depression that he was suffering from, and the poor decisions that came about as a result of him gambling on football. And again, for me, like, I believe him. I take him at his word. Certainly, he could be lying about how this came about. I don't really understand what he has to gain about not being totally truthful in this. But I read the article today, Shane. I don't know if you did, but I have a newfound respect for not only the mental issues that he went through, and the depression he was suffering from off the field, but the way he gutted it out on a broken foot for basically an entire season. That gave me respect for him and his toughness and how he views himself and how he views what an NFL player should be doing for his team. Before that, I was of the opinion that I didn't want to have anything to do with Calvin Ridley this year. And now I read that and I'm like, you know what? Maybe the time is now to start floating some offers for Calvin Ridley. Let me know. I don't know if you read it, but let me know what your thoughts are on Calvin Ridley right now.
No, I read it. I mean, I love this honesty. I think it shines a light. The injury issues, the mental health issues, right? All those things, which I think is great. I'm rooting for him. I'm definitely like in his favor. I'm hoping he does well. And if he puts up that 1,400-yard season like he's saying he will, then that'd be great for fantasy. I think he's going to have some rust. I mean, we've seen players sit out 1 year and have rust. I think it's going to take him still a little bit, but it seems like he's in the right place and healthy. So, I'm a fan. I don't know if I feel like after the article, his value's going to go up a little bit.
Right.
So I don't know if I'm going to buy yet, but I think that buy window will be there this offseason.
So Calvin Ridley right now is going to be turning 29 years old, not till December. But he's a young 28 because of the mileage, obviously. He is going right now, and this is, I think this is so compelling. In the Never Too Early FFPC best ball tournament, Shane, you have Calvin Ridley going at wide receiver 29 at the 512. You have Christian Kirk going at wide receiver 27 at the 508. They're basically at the same spot. To me, you're more team Christian Kirk than Calvin Ridley for redraft purposes, right?
Yeah, I think I'd rather have Kirk. Higher floor, and I think his ceilings are similar too. But the article makes me want to draft Calvin Ridley just to have him. But I think I'd take Kirk.
All right, so we should bring this up too, and I don't know how much fantasy analysis there's going to be on this, but it's going to be fun to talk about. I was not aware that there was a man in the NFL named Chosen Anderson. I was also not aware that it was the former Robbie Anderson, who played, obviously had his breakout season in Carolina, and then kind of foundered with Arizona this past year, and now he's cut. And this is when you're talking about DeAndre Hopkins before. He saves $12 million against the cap for him, 7 catches for 76 yards in 10 games. I mean, it does not get worse than that. His season's done. His career's done, at least for fantasy purposes. But if Hopkins gets moved, now all of a sudden, no Anderson, no Hopkins, and you're looking at Rondale Moore and Marquise Brown. Shane, do either of those guys represent a buy in dynasty leagues for you right now? Because I feel like, Moore was a high pedigree type guy. We know what Marquise Brown was in Baltimore, and he showed out in Arizona for a good portion of the season. What would you be doing with those guys in dynasty? Buy, sell, or stay put, excuse me.
I think I'd buy Hollywood Brown. I thought he was phenomenal last year, and people still, see the weight, and they're like, nope, no, I'm going to give up on him. I think he's worth a late first round rookie pick. I think if you're a Hollywood Brown owner, people would consider that. I probably would sell, I'd probably buy Hollywood Brown now before the Hopkins stuff happens. I think once Hopkins is gone, if he's gone, I'd probably sell Rondale Moore. I've never been a huge Rondale Moore guy and fan, and I just maybe a new coaching staff comes in and uses him right, but they didn't draft him, they didn't pick him, and he's a very specific player that you have to have a very specific system for. I just don't see much happening there. I think they'll draft or sign some receivers here coming up.
Yeah, they definitely need depth at that position. Greg Dortch is just not going to cut it, right? For year number 2 in his career. I do want to bring this up. We're doing a fun little thing here at the Better Sports Network. We have something called the NFL Free Agency Match Game. Okay, and this is it's compelling stuff. You can play for free right now. Bettersports.com/game. Real easy to enter. You have all the way up until midnight on Monday night. But all you have to do is go to that website, bettersports.com/game. 10 free agents listed there. You just pick where you think they will end up in 2023. I believe, and I my producer Ben and Carol will tell me right now, the prize I believe is at $100 in the Better Sports Network store. I believe it's $100 in BSN cash if I remember correctly. If you do get the most right out of this list, I'm looking at the list right now, and I won't go through all of them, but I want to ask you about some of these, Shane. We talked about Jimmy Garoppolo already. As far as Juju Smith-Schuster goes, interesting guy here because he was signed for very little money last year in Kansas City and played pretty well last year, put up some good numbers with Patrick Mahomes. And now it seems like his market is a lot hotter right now than it was at this time last year. I think he's going to re-sign with Kansas City. I think he understands the best way to win and put up numbers is having Patrick Mahomes throw to you. And I think he's back in Kansas City. Is that how you see it as well?
Yeah, I wrote down the Chiefs. That's why I think he'll be back. It's just like too easy. The Chiefs have a need, and I don't think any team's going to pay him a ton of money.
Okay, so let me ask you this. David Montgomery is another guy on this list. We can talk about Khalil Herbert. I am of the opinion that if Montgomery leaves the Bears, they're going to bring somebody else in, and I don't think Herbert's going to be a 3-down guy. Yeah, may not be a popular opinion. That's the way I see it. But Montgomery, I could see him, and I think I chose this, going to the the NFC champs in the Philadelphia Eagles if they let Miles Sanders go. I like the idea of bringing David Montgomery to pair with Kenneth Gainwell there as well. So I had Montgomery going to the Eagles. Shane, your thoughts on where Montgomery is going to end up in 2023?
Like this one's a stretch, but hear me out. David Montgomery from Cincinnati, Ohio. I think he signs with the Bengals. Right?
Oh, that's spicy because they let Mixon go, right?
Let Mixon go. Samaje Perine's a free agent. I think Samaje Perine's going to get more money than Montgomery might. And Montgomery's kind of one of those running backs left, like, oh, wait, I'm not getting paid. The Bengals sign him cheap.
You know what I've been doing in a couple of my early drafts is I've been drafting Perine because I think that he has a better chance of coming back to Cincinnati than Joe Mixon. And I guess like the obvious thing is like, okay, well, Perine's probably not going to be a 3-down guy, although they did kind of treat him as a 3-down guy down the stretch last year, where he was in games a lot more than he was in the regular season. We saw less of Joe Mixon down the stretch. We saw more of Samaje Perine. So I totally see the David Montgomery thing in Cincinnati. People are going to go gaga over him. Now I work with at one of my jobs here. Work with a Lions fan. And I said Dalton Schultz was on. I told him about the game, bettersports.com/game. Pick the NFL free agency match game. You can play it for free. Dalton Schultz is on this list. I have him going to the Detroit Lions. I think this is a perfect opportunity for the Detroit to spend some cash, put somebody next to Jared Goff, Jameson Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown. I feel like he's like the missing link. He's a solid blocker. Detroit has nothing, in my opinion, right now, as far as tight ends go. They have some depth. That's it. Schultz would make a lot of sense there. I could easily see him going back to Dallas, but I decided I'm going to go a little crazy here. I'm going to say Dalton Schultz to Detroit. Your thoughts on Schultz, Shane Hallam?
I kind of like that. I'll take the easy way out. I think he's going to the Chargers, following Kellen Moore, offensive coordinator, who I think really liked to use Dalton Schultz in that old Jason Witten type role. So follow Kellen Moore over there to LA.
Miles Sanders is the last guy we'll talk about on this list. The full list, again, bettersports.com/game. Get over there right now. You see the link right there that we posted here on the app. Join it for free, and you can win fabulous prizes, obviously, on that as well. Miles Sanders from the NFC champs. I don't know if they bring him back. He's such an interesting guy. He told us not to draft him last year, coming off a 0 touchdown performance in 2021, and then he gets into the end zone double-digit times in 2022. Miles Sanders, I have him. I'm trying to think where I had him going on this, and I can't remember exactly where it was, but it wasn't Philadelphia. I didn't see him going. But you know what I said? I think I have him going to Atlanta. because and we should get into the Tyler Algier discussion too, because I think this guy, he's the starter right now. There's no way he's going to be the starter for Atlanta with all the cap space that they have coming up in this offseason. I think I had Sanders going to Atlanta, getting his payday down there, and pair with Algier. I think those guys complement each other pretty well. So I have Miles Sanders in Atlanta. I don't see him back in Philly, Shane.
Yeah, I don't see him back in Philly. You're kind of convinced me on the Atlanta one. I might want to go that now. I have him going to the Texans. I think similarly, he would be a good pairing for Dameon Pierce. And I don't think the Texans are going to want to spend a high draft pick on another running back. Sanders might be a good fit.
For all this and more, bettorsports.com/game. We have Orlando Brown, Javon Hargrave, Marcus Peters, Tremaine Edmonds are all on this list as well. I made my choices. They may not be the best choices. And if you think you can beat me, bettorsports.com/game is where to play the NFL free agency match game. It's going to be fun. Compete against Shane Hallam, compete against me. It's going to be a blast. Remember, you only have until midnight on Monday to make your choices. So time is running out because it's already Thursday, ladies and gentlemen. Time's running out on hour number 1. Let's get to hour number 2 right after this. Shane is going to give us his expert dynasty advice. Never played dynasty fantasy football before. He's going to give you some tips and tricks. What is a Devy League? Shane's going to tell us that and why it's gaining popularity. We're going to talk about the combine and how to understand and assimilate this information for maximum performance from your dynasty team. And we're going to talk about rookie picks. When's the best time to deal them? When's the best time to acquire them? That and more. Shane Hallam from the Draft Countdown, the Devy Marketplace and Dynasty League Football. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this on the Bettor Sports Network.
Monday Night Rants with Edward Rouse on Bettor Sports Network.
Do you believe in the Madden curse? Do you think that's a real thing?
I did. Now, I don't think it's as big of a deal anymore, but it was a real thing for a solid 10, 15 years.
Yeah, it was Sean Alexander, LaDainian Tomlinson, Peyton Hillis.
LT was never on the cover. I know that.
Was he not? I thought he was one. Okay, well, you do know all the covers of everything.
Yeah, okay. So if you want, I could do this real quick. So Garrison Hurst is the first official Madden cover athlete, 1999. 2000, I believe they still put John Madden on the cover. And then 2001 is where it all started. So 2001, you have Eddie George. 2002, Dante Culpepper. 2003, Marshall Falk. 04, Michael Vick. 05, Ray Lewis, first defensive player on the cover.
Okay.
06, Donovan McNabb. 07, Sean Alexander.
Okay.
08, Vince Young. 09, Brett Favre.
Okay.
10 is a trick one because it's
no way you know.
And Larry Fitzgerald. 11, Drew Brees. 12, Peyton Hillis. 13, Calvin Johnson, I believe so.
You're right.
14.
No way you know all this.
14, also a trick question.
Uh-huh.
I believe that's the Madden 25 cover, and it's Barry Sanders, unless you got it for the new consoles, in which case Adrian Peterson
Oh my God.
was on the cover.
You're not cheating. You're not looking at.
Swear on my life. Swear on my life.
Okay. Keep on going.
15, you have Richard Sherman.
Okay.
16, hold on. 16 is Odell Beckham.
Okay.
16. 17, now this is the one I get mixed up because 17 and 18 are back-to-back Patriots.
They are.
17, I think, is Gronk, and 18 is Brady.
You are correct.
19 is Antonio Brown.
Correct.
20, Patrick Mahomes.
Oh my goodness.
21, Lamar Jackson. 22, Brady Mahomes. 23, John Madden. But yeah, dude, I'm a cover nerd when it comes to this stuff.
We now know, but that was really impressive. I don't know how.
Thank you.
That's literally 29 of them or something like that. Wow, that is. You did not miss a single one, and you even got the special editions where they had 2 people on the covers.
Monday Night Rants on Bettor Sports Network.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show right here on the Bettor Sports Network. I'm your host, Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, and of course, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown. You follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman. Follow the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Welcoming in Dynasty expert tonight, Shane Hallam. You follow him on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, P like Paul. Or what's your middle name, Shane? We always ask you this. I always forget.
It's Patrick.
Shane
Yeah.
Patrick Hallam. Very fitting for the month of March, obviously, with St. Patrick's Day coming up. Follow him on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, at DLF Football, at Debbie Marketplace, at Draft Countdown, all the many publications that Shane produces work for. So we have been talking about Dynasty Fantasy Football. And it is the time of year for Dynasty. This is Dynasty season, as the kids say. It's also a great time for a lot of other sports that we've been covering on the Bettor Sports Network. From March Madness, the World Series, Bettor Sports Network is presenting right now the 2023 Sports Futures Draft, featuring picks and odds for the most exciting sporting events of the year. You can join Corey Parson, Nando DeFino, and the Bettor team of producers to find out where the best values in sports futures, plus betting advice, plus strategy and more. Don't miss the Sports Futures Draft. It's playing at bettorsports.com and on demand on the BSN app right now. For anybody who is looking to get into Dynasty Fantasy Football for the first time, Shane, I hear it from all the time from FFPC players. They play in their home leagues, their office leagues, and then they take the next step. They join the FFPC. I remember we got leagues starting at $5, so it's not just high stakes fantasy football. They go up to $10,000 entry fees, but there's plenty of action over at the FFPC. But a lot of that's redraft, right? A lot of it's best ball, and then people look at what we have for Dynasty. And the startups we have, the orphan teams that they can take over. And they're like, you know what? I want to give Dynasty a shot, but they're kind of coming in blind, right? So for anybody who's watching this and wants to start playing Dynasty Fantasy Football, but they don't want to go in just as, not knowing anything or all the tips and tricks, what's the best advice or the best pieces of advice you can give for somebody starting Dynasty Fantasy Football in 2023?
I think the first thing to look at when you look at a dynasty team, and whether it be a startup or an orphan that you took over, I think what young dynasty players do is they think of dynasty as forever. Right? Like, this is my forever team. Don't do that. Think of it in kind of a 3-year window. And if you're a redraft person, that's usually not all that different, from how you're looking at redraft. Take a little bit of age into account. If this is it for him one more year, then yeah, his value is down. But look at that 3-year window. I think people tend to go too young in startups, or they take over an orphan. They're like, I got to trade everything. I think that's a mistake. Like, you really evaluate your assets, like we talked about before. Try to buy assets that are appreciating. They're going to go up in value, whether it be because of a move that's made. Value could be perception or reality. It could be scoring points, or it can just be, talk on Twitter. Like, those things all change values, and that's what you have to look at. And the other thing I'll say is have a plan, have a goal, which might sound stupid, but I think a lot of people just, kind of play a little bit here, a little bit there. If you're in a startup, what are you really trying to do? Are you trying to compete this year? Are you trying to have kind of a middle of the road team that has some good players that could make the playoffs? That's usually what I do. Like, let me try to make the playoffs, and you never know what's going to happen there, but I'm still going to keep a lot of my picks, or maybe trade for extra picks, so I can invest some youth into this, and eventually things will work out. It's fun. Like one of my favorite strategies that I did was in the Pros versus Joe's Best Ball Dynasty that I'm in. And the startup, I traded for first round picks for the next year. Like, I traded everything, and I drafted a bunch of 2nd-year receivers, Deontay Johnson, guys like that like were, not much. And then boom, I drafted all these players. I drafted Javonte Williams and Jalen Waddle and Kyle Pitts, and and now I have a pretty good team. And now I can move some of my pieces for guys that are going to help me win and get and compete. So have a long-term plan and goal in mind. Try some different things. Have fun with it.
So a couple of follow-ups to that. We were talking on these airwaves last week with Chad Parsons from Under the Helmet and Football Guys, and I asked him about the strategy that you just employed. Now, like Dave the Dizzle Gerzak, co-founder of the FFPC, We refer to this as the Cavalier King Charles method. Norm Cruz, longtime FFPC dynasty player. This is what he did with all his dynasty startups, right? He would trade high startup picks for first rounders next year. And that dude would have 6, 7 first round picks the following year in all his dynasty leagues. Yes, you probably weren't. Now, that wasn't always the case. Sometimes he would compete with these very young squads right away. But year 2 is when you really cash in on getting all this value, right? And it's worked out for him. Is this a strategy that you have deployed out in several of your dynasty leagues? It obviously worked out for you in the FFPC Pros versus Joe's dynasty. But I feel like the more you do this, the more successful you can be.
Right. And because every rookie year is different too. So, I think if you're willing to play in a lot of dynasty leagues, to kind of try it every year, and eventually you're going to hit on some of those really good pockets. So I've had success, in FFP 500 #1, I won a championship. And then
that's the legendary league for FFPC Dynasty. The 500 #1 is like, and listen, we have a $2,500 league, $5,000 dynasty league, whatever. The 500 league #1 is stuff of legend as far as the trades, the personnel that's in that league. I know you're in that league. That's one of the OGs of FFPC Dynasty.
Yeah, a lot of sharp guys in that league too, so it's tough. But we all are moving things around. I won the league. I held on, was in the money year, had a lot of really good players. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to trade them for first round picks because I love the 2020 draft class. And so I did it. I ended up with a ton of picks. I ended up drafting, Jonathan Taylor and, DeAndre Swift, Cam Akers, J.K. Dobbins, CeeDee Lamb. I tried to trade up one pick to get Jerry Jeudy. Guy would not trade me the pick. I was pissed. I had to settle for Justin Jefferson with the next pick. And I was like, man, I missed out on that. So you can also do it with a team that's good, move assets for a bunch of firsts of rookie picks and, kind of rebuild very quickly in that way too.
I always bring this up because it's probably the best trade I've ever done in any of my dynasty leagues. But when Todd Gurley was having the issues with his knee, right when there were more whispers than anything else where we didn't realize, oh my God, Todd Gurley is never going to be the same again. I decided, you know what, I'm going to go all in. And I ended up trading him. He was the headline of a package. And I ended up not giving up a whole lot else. I mean, there's a second round pick or a couple second round picks. But I ended up getting, if I remember correctly on that deal, I got back Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, and CeeDee Lamb, which was just chef's kiss, right?
Yeah.
Because Gurley never regained his even close to what he was before. I think he had one decent season after that. And by decent, I mean like maybe top 20. Wasn't even that great. But then all of a sudden you get all these assets. And that's the thing. Because like at the time, I had people in my league telling me, Balky, what are you doing? This is an awful trade. Gurley, he's going to be fine. There's no reason to do this. And I'm like, I'm taking a shot here, and it worked out. And taking your shot is something I would recommend. The one thing I want to get back to, and I think you're spot on with this, 100% agree. Dynasty is not a forever format. It is, but it's not. And I think once you start thinking about it not in a forever format, you become a better Dynasty player. What's the window that you like to look through as far as competition or years of competition? Is it a 2-year window, a 3-year window? Because I think with the NFL, man, like player values can fluctuate so much from year to year. It's tough to look at it from any more than that. How do you sort of view your competitive windows in dynasty leagues?
I usually 2 years. I mean, I think that's the competitive piece. And if you feel like you can do more than that, when it gets to that point, then you can. But like you said, values happen. Todd Gurley is a great example of that.
Yeah.
We had a guy that won you a championship and wasn't on your team in a couple of years. So I 2 years windows, if I'm close, like in the 500 #1, I got second last year. I think I got one more year to take a shot at it. If it doesn't happen, I'm probably moving my Christian McCaffreys and my Jonathan Taylors and let's start over, and start over isn't like burn it all to the ground. Right. But I'm going to get younger, get picks, and feel like I have a hold of how to make those picks.
Let me ask you an unfair question right now. It's what I love to do. Running backs. At what age, if there was a blanket age where you would look to maybe start selling on a guy who maybe has had a really solid workload, a guy who is heavily involved in what the team's offense is doing. Is there an age where you start looking at like, okay, maybe now's the time to get out on this guy? I might be early, but this is the age I want to start looking at, seeing what I could get for this guy. Do you have a set age, or is it just so player dependent you can't pick an age level?
It is. I mean, I would say it's probably 26-ish to like that 26 to 27 range. Like second contract really for me is it. You know, once they sign that second contract, I want to try to move them. Now I've sold too early. I've sold Christian McCaffrey too early. You know, I've sold players too early. And at the same time, there are players like a Dalvin Cook who I sold. And honestly, he's still about the same value was when I sold him. Like, I don't regret it, even though he's performed, right? So
well, let's talk about Dalvin Cook here for a second, because I feel like his dynasty value is the most depressed it's been since he's entered the league right now.
Yeah, it's gone down. I mean, looks like even the Vikings might have taken offers to trade him. So, you know, he could end up having a decent year, but it's coming. Like, Dalvin Cook's been beat up. He's had injuries. This year was great. Who knows what next year will bring? But yeah, I mean, this is probably the cheapest he's been. And I don't mind doing that. Like, I almost will sell in that 26 to 27 range. And then when they get 29 to 30, sometimes I'll buy super cheap.
Oh, like,
yeah. You know, second round pick. I'll buy them back. And that's not a bad strategy to have in Dynasty.
Speaking of that 26-27 range, we talked about Saquon Barkley in the first hour. Dude just turned 26. You said that you'd be willing to cash in the right deal. What's the right deal for Barkley right now? Is it a first round plus? Is it, and I want to talk about Alvin Kamara in a second, so I don't want to forget about that. But is it a first round plus? Is it 2 first round? Like, how do you measure a guy like Saquon Barkley, who had, again, a career year last year, but he's playing on the franchise tag for now? We'll see if they work out a deal. But your thoughts on Barkley? What would you cash him in for right now?
It's hard because I think I would want a first round plus. I think I'd want, 106 and the 24 first. Will someone give that up? I'm not sure. If I had where I have Saquon Barkley, I've aimed for the 102 and one quarterback, which people are willing. Yeah, I've had some interest. So I could draft a Jahmyr Gibbs or Jackson Smith and Jigba, or I've tried to trade them. Like I'll toss in a second round pick for Breece Hall. Get younger with a player that's already out there. I can add a pick to it, and it feels good.
Let's talk about we just covered Dynasty 101, Dynasty 201. What's some next level stuff that, like, once you're initiated, once you've been, you're used to player values, you have a good feel for it, you know what it takes to keep your team competitive every year. What's as we get, even further beneath the surface, what are we talking about with Dynasty leagues as far as how you can gain a leg up on players that maybe are as educated or as informed as you? I'll tee you up with this one right now. If you have the time, man, send out as many trade offers as you possibly can, right?
Yeah. And don't be afraid. And like, I've gotten some crap from some longtime FFPC Dynasty players for this. Don't be afraid of what I like to call carpet bomb trades.
Yep.
If I have a guy that I will sell for a 2024 first, guess what? All 11 teams are getting the offer of that guy for a 2024 first. I don't care what first it is. I don't care how good your team is, right? There's a good chance 1 in 11 will accept my deal. And I've had that happen a lot of times. People are like, this trade's stupid. Stop sending me these trades. I'm not competing or I'm not rebuilding or whatever. And then 2 weeks later, I get them to accept the trade. Like, if I wouldn't have done it, I wouldn't have gotten the trade done. So don't be afraid to do that. Sometimes you have to look stupid or look like the bad guy. Don't try to fleece people on deals.
Right.
You don't have to do that, but it's fine to offer a lot of trades. One thing I do in my bigger money dynasties now, I used to do for all of them when I had more time, but is keep a journal. It sounds stupid, but write down what your opponents do. Who do they sign? The fab they spend. What trades do they make? Do they always trade for draft picks or always trading away draft picks? Are they always trying to compete Like you can get tendencies and then start to use those before anyone else will. If someone always trades their future picks, I'm the first one offering deals for the future picks when that opens up, because I know I can get them cheaper then and before anyone else does, and they get more expensive. I've found that's worked a lot for me as I've learned the other people in my league, especially if a league that's not doesn't have high turnover. It's a really good thing to do.
You know, it's always fascinating too, is just how player valuation fluctuates so much from owner to owner in your league, where you talk about carpet bombing everybody. And there's one team that said they would never accept it. And then you get somebody smash accepting it, right? If you send out the same offer to everybody else, it's so wild, and you never know what you can come across. So if you have the time, Ferris Bueller, if you have the time and the means, I highly recommend it. It is so choice. It is a choice way to build dynasty. Thanks to producer Ben and Carroll. I was going to forget, but he reminded me. Alvin Kamara. This is a guy I was talking with. I think I was talking with Chad Parsons about this last week, or somebody else. Alvin Kamara pleaded not guilty during his arraignment on charges of conspiracy to commit battery and battery resulting in substantial bodily harm. Trial is starting at the end of July, which is not great timing for Kamara. Dynasty leagues, I have him in a couple, have not been shopping him because I feel like this is not the news I want to be shopping him for, because I feel like the best I'm going to get is like 65, 70 cents on the dollar. Your thoughts on Kamara right now? What should dynasty owners be doing with that running back?
I think if you have him, you have to hold him, almost kind of let the suspension probably happen and let it, come out. And then if he smashes for a game or two, he's back. That's when you can sell him. I've sent some offers. I mean, some low ball offers for him, 205, 24 second, just to see if someone's that scared that they'll give him up, or if they'll counter with a player added, something like that. Sometimes I'll add a player, a younger player, we talk like a John Mechie or Rondale Moore or someone like that. And they're like, well, maybe they'll take a 205 or Rondale Moore. So I'm trying to buy them. I think a lot of times those suspension players are actually good buys because their value is going to go up once that suspension happens.
We have spent this entire show talking redraft and dynasty. We have not gotten to Devy leagues. Now, I myself I've never been in one before. I know a lot of people talk about them. I know they're gaining in popularity. For anybody who's never heard about Devy, give us Devy 101 here, Shane.
So Devy is a dynasty league, except you have usually a separate draft where you can draft college players. That's it. The college players don't score you any points until they're in the NFL, but you have them on your roster, so you can trade them, you can hold them, and then once they get drafted in the NFL, you get them. Everything else runs like a dynasty league. And you might say, well, I don't watch college football, or I only know a couple guys. The nice thing with Devy leagues is it just gives you another asset to trade. You have another pick. So you could be the guy. I've had a lot of people do this with success. Join a Devy league. They don't know anything about college football. So they trade all their Devy picks for rookies or for, good players that they like. And that's fine. That's a way to do it. Might be hard to get, the Jamar Chases of the world, but you can do that. So, it's just another thing. If you do like college football at all, it just adds another layer of, it's tough, but it adds another layer to it. So I've been playing it. I started with Scott Fish, probably, it's been 13, 14 years ago. And now it's just blown up here in the past couple of years.
Yeah. And Devy Marketplace on Twitter is where you can go for that. Shane, you produce content for Devy Marketplace. Can you give us one player that you would have your sight set on in a Devy draft coming up that players should be invested in?
Yeah, look, there's one you're going to know the name too. It's Marvin Harrison Jr., the son of Marvin Harrison for Ohio State. He's going to be he's the Jamar Chase, Julio Jones type level wide receiver prospect. He's going to be a top 5 pick. Like that's the number one in one quarterback leagues. That's the guy you got to go out and get.
And I would say too, like, because I'm obviously in Wisconsin here, and I watched him play against the Badgers. My God, that guy, like, he's, first of all, I don't know if he's going to be as good as his dad. His dad was a Hall of Famer, so my guess is probably not. But man, the athleticism, the strength, he passed the eye test, and I didn't watch it. Marvin Harrison Sr. went to Syracuse, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Okay, so I watched very few Syracuse games back in the day. But I do know that this guy looks like just like alpha, like massive alpha, outperformed. And Ohio State's been wide receiver you lately, and this guy looks like the true blue. Like this guy could maybe number one pick overall. I don't want to, bring up Calvin Johnson's name, but I just did. Anything's possible with this guy after what we see, what he can do in 2023 for Ohio State. And I believe now, no Stroud there anymore, but I think they have like 2 or 3 guys that are competing, and they're all blue chippers that are going to be throwing to him this year.
It's funny. His high school quarterback is likely going to start, Kyle McCord. So
there you go. So good news for Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously.
Yeah.
Before we get to the 2024 draft, we have to talk 2023 draft. We saw the combine this past week. This is probably the least I've watched the last, 4 or 5 years, just because I just like looking at the measurables afterwards. I like looking at the 3-cone, the shuttle, everything like that. And I don't necessarily think that it helps me seeing these guys because sometimes like I don't trust my own eyes and I'd rather test the numbers. If I'm going to test my own eyes, it's going to be actual game film, right? So how do you sort of weigh game film, what these guys actually did in college versus what they did as far as their athletic tests in Indianapolis? And I think we already talked about him in the first hour with Anthony Richardson. I think he's the poster boy for this.
Look, film always has to be the go-to. I mean, they're playing football. That's what helps. And it helps for me. I mean, I watch all 22 film of these players, the top guys I've watched many, many times, throughout their college career. So I have an idea of who they are, a pretty good idea, I think. And something I did for Draft Countdown is I predicted the 40 time for every player at the combine, every position, every player, right? And the reason I did it was once it happens, let me see where it's vastly different, right? Where was I really wrong? And that's where I'm like, I'm not just going to change the player, but let me go back and watch again and see, was I wrong? Are they test well, but they suck in the game, right? What happened? So I'll give you an example. Jonathan Mingo is a receiver from Ole Miss,
right? Yeah.
And I had him running a 4.65. He ran a 4.46. I'm like, okay, I was way off, way off. So let me go back and watch him. I watch him, and the offense just like he did a bunch of short routes. Like he never ran in a straight line down the field. I never really got that speed on film. So it's okay. This is something he can do, wasn't asked to do. I'm going to bump him up. So that's how I kind of take those and use them in that way. Now, analytically, I'm not a guy that's digging in the numbers. I'm not a statistician. I know a lot of smart people that are, on Twitter and Debbie Marketplace, the podcast. We have Nelly who does that, who will give me some of these thresholds for 4.75 for tight ends. You want someone faster than that, certain things. And so, I've started to incorporate some of that. But yeah, I've always been a film guy, and that's how I kind of weigh it against the measurables.
So if I were to ask you the impact in your mind on stuff like speed score, relative athletic score, like the RAS I'm big into now the last couple of years, I feel like that's been highly predictive for NFL success. Do you look at those? Do you take those with a grain of salt, or is there something there when you're looking at how to maximize your value in your rookie drafts?
Yeah, no, I think there is something there. I love Kent, and we had him on the Draft Countdown podcast before the combine to kind of like what is the RAS scores. No, I like to look at it. I think you want a guy in the green. If a guy that I liked was in the red is not athletic enough, that's almost the rub. It's like if someone fails, now it's a problem.
Right.
If someone does really well, that's helpful. They might get bumped up a little bit. But that's the issue because like you said, it's predictive that those green, if you're in the top 70, 80, 90 percentile of anyone that's ever worked out of your position for the NFL draft, you're probably athletic and can do it. If you're in the 20, 10%, it's going to be hard to be successful against NFL athletes.
So I want to pick your brain on a lot of rookies here, and we'll do that in the final segment. But before we get to the final segment, I want to ask you your rookie pick philosophy. I always feel like the time to trade rookie picks is during the season, and the time to acquire players is in the off season. Has this been the way that you've attacked trading as far as, again, trying to maximize the most that you can get in trades? I know it's kind of a blanket statement. Oh, I'm going to trade the picks when they don't matter during the season. I'm going to trade the players when they don't matter in the off season. I know it's kind of a blanket statement, but your thoughts on that aspect?
I think it's the way to go. I think it's absolutely the way to go because once once the games start and you're scoring points, that's when people need players. You got to start players and not picks. I definitely keep an eye on the league week to week. Who's doing well? Who's overperforming? Can I get their draft picks, right? Or, after like the first week or two, sometimes you have those 2-0. We all have. You have the 2-0 teams that are kind of frauds, right?
Mhm.
And it's
Yep.
like, let me try to get his first next year. That's the time to get those. And then usually I have a good amount of picks so that now I can trade some for players. And that's the thing, is you don't have to have the rookie picks to draft the rookies. You can trade them at this point. So that's definitely what I'm with you. It's definitely what I like to do.
I talked about my Alvin Kamara regret. Let me tell you another player I regretted not trading last year when literally everybody told me to. I was like, no, I know more. I'm smarter than you. And I clearly wasn't. Clyde Edwards-Helaire. That dude got off to such a great start, such a touchdown-dependent start. Everybody and their mother was telling me that you need to cash in on this guy right now. I easily could have gotten an early second-round pick. Well, not an early second-round pick, but a second-round pick at that point in the season last year, and I didn't do it. And now this dude, he might not even be on the Chiefs roster next year. He's going to be cut in dynasty leagues. It's insane. I really dropped the ball on that one. I don't know how many shares of Edwards-Helaire you have, but man, I wish I had a lot fewer right now.
I know, right? It hits that point when you're like, that you wish you would have moved him. Yeah. I moved him. I can't remember. Maybe it was before the season for a 2023 first, and that team ended up with a 101. So I actually moved him for Bijan Robinson. Worked out one league. I am caught with a couple Clyde Edwards-Helaire bags, so I'm with you. It's not all of them, but I had one good trade there.
I just think that in the annals of fantasy football history, we're going to go back and examine the Clyde Edwards-Helaire career. His rookie year, Shane, you remember this. His rookie year, some drafts he was like a mid-first round pick. That's redraft. That's not rookie. Yeah. Mid-first round. And you think about like what he's done over the course of his career. He's been, a heart attack type guy on his value. It's crazy. And he is the poster boy for, Joe Bryant from Football Guys always says things change pretty fast around here, right? And they have changed several times with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. We have not talked enough about the rookie class. We're going to get into that right now. Coming up in the last segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about the rookie quarterbacks, Bijan Robinson. We're going to talk about some second-round sleepers, some day two sleepers of the draft. Shane's going to let you in and who he likes and who might be good targets for your rookie drafts coming up in a couple of months here. And much more from Shane Hallam from Draft Countdown, Devy Marketplace, Dynasty League Football. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. It's our last break. We'll come back and we'll crush it right after this.
Lunch Money with Kyle and Ray. Weekdays at noon Eastern, presented by FantasyGuru.com.
Now he swings at the first pitch and lines it into right center.
How did a guy who was being selected in the first round pretty well everywhere last year, he proceeded to lose 33 runs, to lose 16 homers, to lose 14 RBIs, and to lose 37 points in batting average. Oh, and 184 points in OPS. He went down everywhere. How does that guy, Vlad Jr., still register as the #1 fantasy first baseman? Ahead of Paul Goldschmidt, who won the MVP last season. Ahead of Mr. Freddie Freeman, who does the same thing every year, which is hit .315 with 25 homers and 100 ribbies. Ray, it's like Vlad Guerrero Jr. had nothing to worry about. It's like they thought they were getting him and his dad, as you can see there on the photo. You get both of them when you draft him at #1. I'm just surprised, and it was not a bad season, but Ray, it was such a disappointment compared to what he posted in 2000.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair to say. Vladimir Guerrero, in 3 of the 4 years, he's been average to good. He had one spectacular season. And we keep talking about it and talking about it and talking about it. The positives are the lineage, positives are the skill set, positives are the StatCast data, which everything's like top 5% murders the baseball. The negatives are he has not hit 275 in 3 or 4 years. We keep talking about this too. He does not get the ball in the air. It's remarkable his ability to hit 30 plus home runs, given that he never gets the ball in the air. His ground ball rate last year was 52%.
Well, and we're asking the question, how is he still number one at first? But what catches me even more so, Ray, is the overall. I mean, he's a first-round pick overall, and I don't think he has any business in the first round. I look at his profile, and there are so many guys going behind Vlad that just have business in the first round that deserve to be there. Freeman, Machado, Bichette, Rafael Devers, I think maybe Pete Alonso. You put Austin Riley ahead of him. If he gets 310, 30, 190, he's a first rounder.
I think the play with Vlad is the batting average because he hits the ball monstrously hard. I could see him hitting 320.
Can you hit 320 with a 52% ground ball rate?
You can, but it helps if you're athletic and fast. And he's
yeah, exactly. And I get it. His hit tool's strong, Ray, and he's good. It's funny his ground ball percentage is that high because on the occasions when I get to watch Blue Jays baseball, I don't see it. I see him hit the ball. And it's not really grounders. I'm surprised the number is that high. It feels like he stings the baseball, but I guess there's just no lift overall in his game.
It's just a little tweak to his swing that could really lead to that growth back toward where he was in the home run column. And I think people, he's done it. This is not hypothetical. He did it 2 years ago and he's still just 23.
Make bets and follow your fantasy team while you buy, sell, and trade collectibles in real time. Only on Bettor Sports Network. It's the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on Bettor Sports Network.
25 minutes until the top of the hour here on the Bettor Sports Network. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. Don't go anywhere. At the top of the hour, we've been talking Dynasty. Dynasty Nerds with Garrett Price is going to be coming up next. We'll keep this conversation going. The juices are flowing for Dynasty Fantasy Football Show. Dynasty Fantasy Football on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here on the Bettor Sports Network. Eric Balkman and Shane Hallam crushing it right now with all the Dynasty questions you want answered. And if you are playing in Dynasty or if you want to play in Dynasty, add a Dynasty Orphan team today with the FFPC at myffpc.com. Discounted teams are available ranging from $77 to $2,500. By the way, that's just the normal price on those. You're going to get some reduced price teams at myffpc.com down to $1. You buy a Dynasty team for $1 and resurrect it, take it to the championship. It's at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. At Shane P. Hallam on Twitter, at Draft Countdown, at Debbie Marketplace, at DL Football, for all the Twitter handles you need to follow to consume Shane Hallam's content. Let's talk about the rookie quarterbacks, because I feel like for the majority of the college season, or right when the college season ended, Shane, it went Young, Stroud, Levis, then probably Richardson. And now I feel like Richardson might be the one with the highest ceiling in Dynasty Fantasy Football for DF Dynasty League football purposes. How would you rank the quarterbacks in this year's rookie class?
For fantasy, I think I do go Anthony Richardson one, just for that rushing ability.
Because you're always going for the upside, right? I mean, that's super important to get as much upside as possible.
Well, and like I said, I think even he gives you a high floor because he can run. So he's going to score you fantasy points. If he's starting, he is your starting quarterback on your roster because you know what you're getting out of him. So you get both. You get a high floor, you get a high ceiling. I'll take that. I have CJ Stroud too because I think he is one of the best passers that I've seen probably since Joe Burrow at quarterback. And I think he has similarities fantasy-wise to Joe Burrow, where you're going to get 200, 300 rushing yards and still get, the passing. I have Bryce Young, a very close third. He's athletic. If I have some size concerns. And then Will Levis 4 and Hendon Hooker 5. I think those are the five that the only five you need to worry about.
Bijan Robinson, what's the highest he's going to go in the draft this year? Is it Atlanta? Is it higher than Atlanta?
I released the 7-round mock draft this week. I had him going at 6 to the Detroit Lions.
Wow. Even though they have Swift.
They seem very interested if they do not re-sign Jamal Williams, that they are going to invest probably a round 1 or round 2 pick in a running back. It's very possible. Maybe it's not 6, but I think if Bijan's sitting there, and I think 18 is their other pick, I think they're taking him.
That makes sense with the extra draft pick as well. So in single quarter starts, one quarterback leagues, we know that this is a really good year for quarterbacks. We know this is a really good year for running backs and a great year for tight ends, maybe not so much for receivers. Where do you think you should be drafting potential difference makers in Young, Stroud, Richardson, Levis in start single quarterback? Are any of those guys first round picks? Would you let them slip to the second? When do you start sort of looking at these guys in rookie drafts and knowing that, okay, this is a good investment on my pick right here?
I think late first. I think when you start 111, 112, if you really need a quarterback, I think people almost underrate quarterbacks in one quarterback leagues, because they were so long they could be an afterthought. But getting a difference maker like Richardson, Stroud, or Young, I think I start considering them 111, 112. And you know what? Richardson, I mean, if you want to pull the trigger at 107, 108, I would not blame you if you really have that need.
Where would Hendon Hooker rank for quarterbacks if he didn't tear his ACL? Would he be in the top 3?
He could be. I think he'd be above Levis. And I think he probably would have been a first round pick. So that's what you're getting. If you might have to wait a year, but I think that's what you're getting. And he might be much cheaper, especially in a super flex. I'm drafting Hendon Hooker all day in like round 2 of my rookie drafts.
Do you feel like when because you talked about your mock, your latest mock, when you look at the first round, Shane, obviously there's a lot of quarterbacks in there. Michael Mayer's probably in there at tight end. You probably got a handful of receivers. Bijan Robinson's in there. Maybe Jahmyr Gibbs. I haven't seen it, so I won't presume to know. But do you feel like when you look at those skill position players that are expected to go in the first round this year, do you feel like it's a little bit lighter this year than it has been in years past as far as rookie drafts go?
It is. And I think two reasons for that. One is we have had such historically good receiver drafts the past couple of years. This one feels bad, but it's kind of normal. It's like what it's supposed to be. I think we've had such good ones. We've been spoiled. So I think that's part of it. And the defensive class is so good. The edge rushers, the corners, the offensive tackles, like the positions we don't get to draft, are really good, and that'll push guys down. What it does is if you have people in your league that are just about draft capital, this guy wasn't a first-round pick, know that people are getting pushed down the board, to take it like the early 4th-round running backs to get drafted day 3, they're going to be worth more than people think they are.
So let me ask you this. For your 7-round mock that's up at Draft Countdown right now, we know kind of who's going in the first round. Can you give us some guys that you have going in the second round that will end up being first-round dynasty rookie picks that you really like, that maybe you are valuing a little bit higher than the rest of, draft Twitter or draft analysts out there right now?
I think some big ones are the tight ends. I think if the tight end position, I'm looking at Luke Musgrave, the tight end at Oregon State, who only played 2 games this year, super athletic. I mean, profiles as kind of the Mike Gesicki type of tight end who, has that athletic upside if a team uses them properly and drafts them properly. So, I really like him. I think the tight end position is one to look for. And then I think that the next tier of running backs in the middle of the first round, Zach Charbonnet at UCLA, is, I think, going to be kind of the 105, 106 in single quarterback leagues because he had 215 pounds, runs in the 4.5s, super productive, can catch. He does everything. I think he's going to be a 3-down running back.
So because Charbonnet is a guy that could have come out after his junior year. He decided to stay an extra year. Does that hurt him at all in your mind for Dynasty, the fact that this dude stayed another year when he probably didn't have to, and now he's a year older?
It doesn't too much because, like we kind of talked about, the shelf life's low for running backs anyway.
Right.
1 year isn't going to make a giant difference to me. Like, it's really that second contract that matters. And he stayed, he said, to work on his pass catching. So if it makes him catch 10 more balls, 20 more balls a year, like, I'll take the points, over the years. So I'm still in on Zach Charbonnet.
So not only did you have one tight end going in your mock draft in the first round, you had 3 of them. And I want to bring up Dalton Kincaid because you have him going to my Green Bay Packers. And as far as I looked at the tight ends in this year's class, they're awesome right away. Especially you look at the RAS scores for the tight ends. It's like this has got to be the most athletic tight end class that I can ever remember. I loved Dalton Kincaid And I think it's because his ceiling is much higher than Michael Mayer. I think Michael Mayer is going to have a better rookie year, but his ceiling's much higher. You have him going to Green Bay, and I feel like this is the type of guy that can really stretch the field, get down the seam, and not a lot of people are talking about him because everybody wants to talk about Michael Mayer. Dalton Kincaid, I think, is an athletic freak. Not a freak, but the next level below freak. But then I saw he had a back fracture coming out of Utah. Is he recovered out of that? And how much are you dinging him? Apparently not so much with this back issue coming into the NFL.
I've heard he is just being cautious with it. That
Okay.
there's a good shot he'll work out at his pro day if everything feels good. So I think as long as he does that, I feel pretty good. I think the NFL feel pretty good because he even played with it at the end of the year a little bit. So it doesn't seem like it's super bad for him. But yeah, I mean, I love him. Like you said, he's super athletic, and he's probably the best tight end in this class at finding the hole in the zone. I mean, he you know, you don't want to make the Travis Kelce comparison. No one's going to do that in the NFL. But that was what Dalton Kincaid in college was Travis Kelce in the NFL. Like against USC at like 200 yards because he just every time he knew exactly where to go.
You also have Darnell Washington going in the first round in your mock draft too. This is a guy, you know, speaking of athleticism, he's the size of a small offensive tackle, and yet he moves like a wide receiver, which is rare. And I feel like I don't see a whole lot of mocks out there with Washington in the first round. You do. You must obviously really like him.
They're coming. You know, he's in the 98th percentile for athleticism. You said, I mean, 6'6", 5'8", 264, ran a 4.64. They just didn't use him at Georgia, and he's a great blocker. He is like an offensive tackle out there. So you get that, plus you have that size. You know, his athleticism, I think, compares favorably to a Rob Gronkowski, you know, type of big, athletic, can move, it can box you out. I don't know how good of a pass catcher he is because he didn't do it a ton in college, but I do think the upside's there.
You have Jordan Addison in the first round as well. There's knocks on his size, perhaps route tree issues that he ran at USC and Pittsburgh, obviously, before he transferred to be a Trojan. Are those kind of overrated? Do you think Addison's going to be a good, solid professional receiver?
I always feel like when you come in at 18 years old and are pretty dominant and then keep that for 3 years, I'm in. You know, that's when I'll buy it because he was playing against Clemson corners that are starting in the NFL and just, you know, crushed him off the line of scrimmage. He's so quick. I wish at the combine he would have done more because I think he would have showed that quickness like Jackson Smith and Jigba did. So if he falls in some of these rookie drafts because people are scared because he's under 180, I'm going to be scooping him up middle of that first round. Like he'll be on a lot of my dynasty teams, I think.
Greg Shrinkin chiming in the chat right now. Do you guys answer dynasty questions? Yes, we do, and we have the brain to pick of Shane P. Hallam right now at Shane P. Hallam on Twitter. Shane Hallam, a dynasty expert. So any questions you guys have in the chat, I will fire away and let Shane know about them. Until then, I'm going to ask him about Quentin Johnston, another guy who is going to be going in the first round, we think, of the NFL draft. You have him going in the first round. If there is a knock on this guy, what is the thing that worries you the most about him becoming a great, or at least a very good professional NFL receiver?
He's relied his entire college career on size, speed, athleticism, and that's it. That always worries me, right? When you don't have the guy, you know, we've drafted those wide receivers. We drafted some of them out of TCU, Jalen Reagor, of guys that just relied purely on the athletic ability, didn't learn how to run routes. They're taking screen passes. They're just running 9 routes. You know, I don't know if Quentin Johnston can run a full route tree. He looked good at the combine and the drills doing it in shorts, but I just wonder if it's almost too much upside that there's a big downside there too.
There's another receiver that you have going in the first round of your mock. If you want to check that out, draftcountdown.com. It's somewhat a surprising receiver. I don't want to ask Shane about it, but you can definitely check out the analysis, draftcountdown.com. I want to ask you about Jahmyr Gibbs, who you have going in the second round. This is a guy that I've gotten already on a couple of redraft teams this year. I feel like his pass catching ability and then the fact that he lit up the 40 at the combine makes me feel a lot better about it. I think Gibbs is one of those guys that can, you know, follow in a long line of second round real NFL draft running backs that offers pretty good value in his rookie year because of the pass catching prowess.
I thought he looked better catching the ball than almost every receiver at the combine. So he went out. I mean, he was playing receiver. Alabama didn't throw to their receivers because they had him. I think if he gets to a creative offense to, somewhere that they're going to line him up in the slot and move him around, man, I think he's just going to be such a dynasty asset catching the football. I'm coming out in a couple weeks with my player comparisons, like as prospects. He reminds me of Javid Best. You remember Javid Best from Detroit, who if he wouldn't have gotten hurt, I mean, that guy was going to be phenomenal. Just speed, receiving, everything. I think that's what Jahmyr Gibbs has.
Well, I mentioned Dave Gerzak earlier, the co-founder of the FFPC. I play in a lot of leagues with him, and he was all over Javid Best in all our dynasty leagues. He was drafting Javid Best. And then Javid Best, I want to say, like week 2 or 3 of his rookie year, had a 50-plus point game. And then all of a sudden, everybody knew about him. And then the concussions and the injuries kind of held him back. And it was really unfortunate because that dude could have been awesome. All right, so Greg Shrinkin is chiming in with his question right now. He is in a 12-team dynasty league. It's a super flex league. Right now, his top 2 quarterbacks, Shane, are Kirk Cousins and then Mac Jones. He has the opportunity right now to package Mac Jones, Aaron Jones, and the 112 rookie pick, but he gets back Deshaun Watson. It's obviously a lot to give up, but in a super flex, that's a massive upgrade from Mac Jones to Deshaun Watson. It's going to cost him Aaron Jones and the 112. What would you do in that situation, Shane? Which side of the deal would you rather have?
That's a smash accept for me for Deshaun Watson. Like, I'm taking that in a super flex all day because we know what Mac Jones is. He's never going to be more than QB2. Like, he's not going to be Kirk Cousins even. Deshaun Watson, it's a risk. Like Greg said, I mean, it's a risk, but the Browns are locked in for a long time with Deshaun Watson. They're going to do everything to make that work. And he has some rushing upside, gets the rust off. Yeah, I mean, I would make that deal in a heartbeat.
Getting back to the NFL draft, one of the guys that I have seen rise up the never too early draft boards in the FFPC has been wide receiver out of Tennessee, Jalen Hyatt. Athletically, he tested very well at the combine. Seems like a lot of people are really liking him right now. What are the chances that maybe he creeps up to the back end of the first round in the NFL draft on April 27th, Shane?
I think it's very possible. I think he's kind of he's in that late first, early second round mold because of the explosiveness that he showed along with the speed. I mean, you light up Alabama like he did, you should get drafted in the first round. And we know teams like speed. We saw the Kadarius Toney and all that. I think a lot of people are low on him in Dynasty. I think he might end up being a steal because they see a lot of these older speed receivers, Henry Ruggs, all that stuff. I think Hyatt is a little bit different because he's a third-year player. So I'm in. I mean, I've gotten him in some rookie mocks at like the 205 in Superflex, 206. I love that.
You have 4 members of the Tennessee Volunteers offense going in the second round of this year's draft. I just mentioned Hyatt. We talked about Hendon Hooker. You have him as a second-round pick. You also have fellow receiver Cedric Tillman going to the Chargers at 54 in your 7-round mock. Tillman and Hyatt seem to be like very close together here in this draft, maybe closer than I've seen him before. Maybe I just haven't looked at a lot of mocks. But Cedric Tillman in the second round, this could be a sleeper here for rookie drafts, right?
I think it's worth looking into because he was super productive 2 years ago, dealt with injuries last year. I've heard NFL teams really like him. He's one of the better size receivers that gives you kind of that, physical at the line, beat the jam kind of things. I mean, Cedric Tillman, I think he's exceptional, deserves to be a day 2 pick. And another guy, if he falls late second of rookie drafts, I'm drafting him.
What about Devin A-Chain? I know that the combine, and I'm going to screw this up, but I think 3 of the top 8 40 times for running backs of all time were run this year. And I can't remember who the third guy was, but I know Jahmyr Gibbs was one, and I know Devin A-Chain was one, and I know there's one other one. But A-Chain is a guy that I have seen go in the mid-rounds of a lot of redrafts right now. He's probably going to be a borderline first-round pick depending upon where he goes. What do you like about A-Chain out of Texas A&M as it translates to the NFL?
He's the guy that I'm like all in on. I'm grabbing every redraft, early best ball because he's small and people are staying away because he's 188 pounds. But they used him at Texas A&M as a 3-down back. He was running in the middle. He's tough. He's built. I think A-Chain is going to be probably the 3rd to 4th running back off the board in the NFL draft, and then go lower than that in Dynasty rookie draft. So I'm all in on him. The 3rd guy was Keaton Mitchell out of ECU, probably a day 3 pick. That'll be the Isaiah Pacheco of this year, perhaps.
So is it safe to say that because obviously if there's one rookie everybody wants this year, it's Bijan Robinson. You might not have the assets on your dynasty team to go up to the 101 to grab Bijan Robinson. But if there is one player that everybody should have the assets to grab in their rookie draft, is it Devin A-Chain for you?
Yeah, I think it's Devin A-Chain for me, because you're probably still going to be able to get him 201, 202 in Superflex and late first. I think when people start moving away from a player that gets high capital and production in the SEC, that's when I'm jumping on. And I think Devin A-Chain has that home run ability, pass catching ability, and he's tough enough to be an Austin Eckler type of running back in the NFL.
In a vacuum, and we'll just nobody's having their rookie drafts right now, but maybe somebody is. So just in case they are, you don't know where either of these guys are going. Who would you rather have for Dynasty? Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma. These guys are both receivers. Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma or A.T. Perry out of Wake Forest. Who represents the better Dynasty rookie draft pick?
That's close. I think they're back-to-back in my rankings. I think I'd go with Marvin Mims. I haven't been a Marvin Mims guy, but I feel a little more comfortable with his slot ability and his ability to get open with kind of that quickness and speed. I think Perry's good. He's tall. He's long, but I do worry about kind of his body type a little bit, and if he can get separation as much as Mims can.
Sean Tucker is going to be a rookie this year, but I think he has some redraft value. Depending upon where he goes, could he be a 3-down guy in the NFL?
I think he can. He's a little developmental. His vision is tough. He doesn't really set up the defense well, but he's a track athlete. And I think there's some for redraft. I think there might be some value before he runs at his pro day to draft him. So I like Sean Tucker. He's fallen down my board a little bit, but I do think he's a player that can contribute almost immediately in the NFL. I think our pro day is on March 20th, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Last question for you tonight. If Roschon Johnson wasn't backing up Bijan Robinson, would he be a lot higher on a lot of people's boards right now?
I think he'd be a top 50 pick in the NFL draft. And then I think that puts him RB3, RB4, maybe behind Charbonnet. Because, he's big, he's athletic, former quarterback. And the thing people watch the 40 4.55, he ran a 1.52 10-yard split, the same as Bijan Robinson. Only, I think it was like 0.02 slower than Devin A-Chain did in the 10-yard. Mm-hmm. So he's explosive. I mean, he hits you. And I think Roschon Johnson could be a 3-down back if he goes to the right team. I think if a team takes him that needs a running back, you're going to see him pop up boards.
DynastyLeagueFootball.com, DevyMarketplace.com, at Draft Countdown on Twitter, DraftCountdown.com. Shane P. Hallam on Twitter. Shane, thanks so much, man. You were great. Learned a lot.
Well, thanks for having me.
You got it. Bennett Carroll, want to shout out him as our producer tonight. Next Thursday, 7-6 Central, more Dynasty Talk. Jordan McNamara from Football Guys will be joining us, ladies and gentlemen. MyFFPC.com, your home for pre-drafting season tournaments and Dynasty Orphans. Dynasty Nerds with Garrett Price is up next. Thanks so much for watching, everybody. We'll talk with you next week.